The first 10 years, Mika and Joe.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys so much. I would say that, thank you, go ahead. Thank you. Thank you, guys. I would tell you that we don't deserve that, but many of you know that. Well, I want to
Andrea, that's what I was wearing in Java Joe's. It was,
yeah.
Didn't
I want to
bad.
follow up on what Andrea said really briefly, talking about where the show really started. And really, we always consider, even though we started it in May of 2007, the first day of the show really was when Tim Russert burst through the door at Java Joe's in the Iowa caucus. I think it was like on January 2nd or 3rd in 2008. And he came in and asked if he could be on the show. And that's kind of like, for me, Paul McCartney asking, hey, do you mind if I play with your band? Now, that will never happen, but something better happened. Tim Russert asked if we minded if he would be on the show. And it was an extraordinary moment. But that took me back to what Phil Griffin told me when the show first started. And that was, he said, Joe, here's my only advice to you. Always think that you have an audience of one. And it's Tim Russert sitting in his home in Northwest Washington watching the show. And if every guest you have on the show, and every segment you have on the show, and every question you ask on your show is something that Tim would approve of, then you're doing pretty well. And we've fallen far short of that many, many times. But that was really our guiding star. And Mika, why you set the Paris Hilton scripts on fire.
I thought he would approve, but Phil gave us that advice, and then he set us free and put so much trust in us. And it really was the best advice we ever got for the show. This is an incredible honor. And for us, we feel it's really an honor for the men and women who work around the clock to make Morning Joe possible, and there's not a lot of them. We're very small staff. And as someone who spent far too many years, decades actually, on an overnight shift, I know how crushing that work schedule can be, not just on the person working it, but on everybody in their lives. And we feel incredibly blessed every day when we take a look at our team with the bags under their eyes, dark circles, because we know that they are driven by the belief that now more than ever, Americans need to hear the news in a straightforward, unsparing manner. And as Marty Barron reminds his Washington Post reporters every day, we're not going to war, we're going to work. And at Morning Joe, we work around the clock. Our team works around the clock.
And I love that saying that Marty has up on his office at the Washington Post. We're not going to war, we're going to work. It is a great reminder of our job, but we make no mistake of the fact, and the people in our office make no mistake of the fact, that times such as these do demand that our team beats back against the tide of brutish threats from the president and from some of his allies, and some of the threats that we heard about against other journalists, against the threat, actually, against my fiance from NRA TV, saying that her time is running out, and then ominously holding an hourglass and turning it over. We also know that it's our responsibility to call out those times when constitutional norms are being challenged, those times when the President of the United States actually channels Joseph Stalin and calls the media the enemy of the people. And those times when the White House and other politicians do all they can do to undermine the credibility of those who actually try to check their power. We're honored that you've recognized our team's effort, and we do want to thank Phil Griffin again. We want to thank Andy Lack. We, of course, want to thank David so much for all you've done. Not only David Cohen, but our entire Comcast family. And they are a family. You know, MSNBC is supposed to be such a liberal network, but at least since I've been there, especially under the leadership of Phil Griffin, he's been like the Koch brothers in the fact that it is laissez-faire. He lets you do your thing, lets you say what you're going to say, lets you run your show. And I can say this, over the past decade, Phil Griffin has never called us once and told us what we could say or what we couldn't say. And that is something that very few people in this room can say, especially our executive producer, Alex Corson, who hears from Phil every day, so we don't have to. Thank you, Alex. But anyway, we are allowed, because of Phil, we are allowed to speak freely, and we're allowed to speak freely without scripts and without fear, but also with a 7-second delay. But that's another story.
That we have. And that 7-second delay is your fault.
I know.
Having said that, Joe makes fun of himself. I will just add that this whole show was your concept. And 10 years ago, Joe put together an idea to have a discourse among people who don't agree with each other, who maybe don't even like each other, but to find a place to come together in the morning and have a civil discourse, and one that is often extremely joyful to have. And I think you should be really proud of what you've created. I really do.
I think
We get to do this show 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, 52 weeks every year, and we cherish this opportunity. We cherish every moment. We also understand the remarkable responsibility and what is at stake, which is why we share this honor with all of you tonight, who work every day to protect the freedoms guaranteed to all Americans by our First Amendment. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.